Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer, and this is a Tuesday, not a Monday, so this is a very different, a very special Highly Respected. My voice is going to be a little bit out of sorts today. I think I have a cold coming on or something, so I have a little bit of a sore throat. It happens, but the show must go on. As I promised, no Monday episode, so we had to do something on Tuesday. And I'm persevering despite my many hardships and illnesses. So hopefully everyone appreciates that and really shows me a lot of appreciation in the comments and live chats that we see. So we've got a lot to talk about today. I'm mainly just going to jump around to some different topics because there's a lot of news that happened over the last week, as always happens now in the post-Trump era. There's always a ton of news to cover. But the first bit of news is what the hell is going on in Texas? Texas has seen a bunch of mass casualty events over the past few weeks. At the end of April, there was an illegal alien who's been deported 5 times who murdered another immigrant family. I believe they were illegal aliens too. This is how weird what's going on in Texas. Is that the illegal alien family told him, hey, stop firing your AR-15 late at night. And the guy who is likely has gang connections and obviously has a long criminal record, then came over and executed them for telling him to stop firing his gun at a late hour. And then there were 2 more mass casualty events committed by Hispanics. There was the Allen, Texas mall shooting committed by Mauricio Garcia, who is now being called a white supremacist despite being brown. We'll mainly focus on that one. And then there was another Hispanic man who ran over at least 8 people or several people outside of near a migrant shelter in Brownsville, Texas, which is right on the border. So just a lot of crazy stuff going on in Texas at the moment. All committed by Hispanics, even though they're trying to blame guns or something else. It's once again just showing how fucking nuts our country is that all these events happen. The Brownsville driving may just be a DUI. Once again, I don't know. They're saying he shouted anti-immigrant things, and then they show a picture of him in the hospital, and he's clearly very brown. He's got Hispanic style tattoos and stuff. And you're I don't know. I'm not sure what's going on here, but I guess maybe he was shouting anti-immigrant slogans at them in Spanish or something. I don't know. It's something very weird going on. But the weirdest story is definitely Mauricio Garcia, which people are finding it very odd. I mean, if you show the video, the guy gets out of his car, he immediately just starts, shooting at people who are walking around the mall outside. Most of his victims were white, and now they're just saying it's a white supremacist violence. It's I don't know how this is white supremacist terrorism when it's a Hispanic guy, brown Hispanic guy, killing white people, and somehow that's white supremacist terrorism. Who's being terrorized here? This doesn't make any sense at all. And, they always want to go at the white supremacist terrorism as the number one threat. But how is this even white supremacist terrorism? This is This is say a Christian who said maybe he just likes ISIS because he's a nut job, and he blows up a Sunni fundamentalist mosque that is actually, friendly to the Islamic extremists. And they're this is Muslim terrorism. That's a bit like it. It's going up and shooting white suburbanites in an area that, has a lot of conservatives. And then they're this is white supremacist terrorism, and the guy doing it isn't even really white himself. You just have to step back and I think there's something else going on here. Now, there are some claims that Garcia was, that whole profile that they've been uncovering may be fake. It may not be him. Whatever. I mean, it seems clear that he did have, Nazi tattoos, which, once again, very weird to see a guy with a swastika and SS bolts, brown skin. But I don't know. It's just this guy's just clearly a nut job. I mean, that's the real thing. And this is the story with all these mass shooters. And this guy had also, despite being a supposed Nazi, he was celebrating the transgender school shooting in Nashville. And you're just I just think this guy's a nut. I don't think there's any ideological impulse to this. And that's why you really can't see any ideological impulse unless there's a group that's actively supporting that. And so that's always the difference between Islamic terrorism and quote unquote white nationalist terrorism is that never serves a cause. There's not some group out there that's like, oh yeah, going to shoot up a mall or grocery store or whatever. That's what we want. Yeah, no, it's just some nut job who's just like there who would kill people for whatever reason, goes and kills people for whatever reason. And this is very clear in this situation. There's that Buffalo shooter who had that idiotic manifesto. There's also that El Paso shooter and stuff where they also had a manifesto. You could say that there was some type of terrorism there because it's attached with the manifesto. Here, this is very clearly that this guy's a nut. This guy is just wanting to kill people. I don't even know what ideological impulse we could say because he mostly killed white people. Actually, I do need to change. Actually, I double-checked on this. It looks like most of the people he shot at were white, but maybe a lot of those survived. Actually, looking at the victims, it's actually like a very diverse group. I think one definitely white. One person may have been white, like white Hispanic, and then one was like an Indian woman, or some of them may have been white presenting. Because I remember, there's that grainy footage of it, and they even showed like the really graphic stuff, and it looked like all light-skinned victims. But one of the people who died was an Indian woman, and another was an Asian family. So at least half the victims, would definitely not count as white. But if they're calling this brown guy a white supremacist, some of his Hispanic victims may have been more light-skinned than him. And anyway, didn't seem like he was just targeting all the non-whites there, because you can see like when he opens up, he's just targeting white people, and then the people who are laid on the ground have light skin. I don't know if he could tell the difference, whatever. But the general point is that this is not has anything to do with ideology. This guy's just a maniac, a nut who fantasizes and idolizes mass shooters and mass killers, and he wanted to be like one of them. And maybe that's why he gravitated towards this Nazi stuff or whatever. He just thought it was like edgy, and it expressed his, antisocial personality and whatever it means. And whenever you look at this, these things happening, everyone has their own explanation. Obviously, the left immediately goes for guns. They did that in the shooting, in the transgender school shooting in Nashville. They do that all the time. They immediately blame the gun and say that if we take these guns away, these maniacs will just not kill anyone. They'll become perfect members of society. The conservatives, they bounce around deciding. Sometimes they go with conspiracy theory. They're now trying to claim this guy's like a CIA plan or something. I don't know. Like some weird conspiracy theories going on with this guy. Some people are even claiming it was cartel violence. I don't think it was. Why would the cartel shoot up a mall in like suburban Dallas? This is like far away from the border. I don't understand that at all. And it's that's probably not it. Like the cartel does not want to commit mall mass shootings. They do not want to attract more attention from the federal government that they already have. And then when they seek solutions, so like we need to just have like armed people. Well, I don't want to say this. It's like I think in that situation, if you had people with concealed carry, maybe they could take him out. But also in this situation, it's like a police officer rushed over quickly and took the guy out. So police reacted, appropriately in a timely manner, in the same way that they reacted in the Covenant School shooting, where police were immediately there. They were hunting the shooter down, looking for that person, and then took him and immediately confronted them and shot him. They did what they're supposed to do, and the same in this case here is that a cop came over and shot him. So it was immediately. So even with like concealed carry, that person would have still probably killed, maybe a fair amount of people, because that person just got out of the car, started shooting. And somebody with a good guy with a gun eventually rushed over and took him down in a fairly timely manner. Some conservatives will say like, "Oh, you just need more armed guards and stuff." But even in this situation, this a cop in the area just like came and took him out. So it's like that person can't be in every single area. So they always like go for that, and it's worse with more of the school shootings where they're just like, let's arm teachers and let's turn schools into prisons. Like there's only one door you can go through, and it's like schools already feel like prisons. You don't need to make, depending on the school, they already are a prison, but I don't think you need to make that more. And I can't imagine a more terrifying thing than a teacher being armed with the students. Maybe in some schools they need that, but I can only imagine my suburban school with like these shitty teachers. and like them threatening us, like, stop interrupting me. So I don't know, and I don't know what some of these teachers would do. Like they're like, it's like some of these cops, like in the Uvalde case, like they didn't even know what to do. So I mean, the sad fact is, and I always say this, is like there's literally nothing you can do about these mass shootings. This is a fact of life in America. We are not going to ban AR-15s, and I oppose that. But I think it's the bans. But I think it's need to make clear is that you're just not going to ban those things. You're not going to ban assault rifles. The only type of gun bans that can, I mean, this is sort of, you could say this is a white pill about your gun rights, especially, if you really care about preserving the Second Amendment, this is very good news for you. But they are never going to do this. They can do some more restrictions. They could do some more mental health background. But usually they fail in that. They usually don't, get these people. I mean, it's like that transgender school shooter should have never had a gun. Like, if you're like, we need to make sure mentally ill people don't get guns. They're never going to disqualify people like that. They're never going to do that. They're never going to, like, the things that they would count as mental illness is being right wing. Maybe that would have covered Mauricio Garcia, but it's like their social media history is like, oh, this guy's a Trump supporter. Well, that's a sign of mental illness, so we're not going to let him have a gun. It's the same with a lot of these stories. And I don't think, so that's, I mean, I support that, the expansion, but you have to realize that the people overseeing it are going to be liberal bureaucrats. So the background checks, and sometimes, a lot of these school mass shooters, there's been a couple. The one that I know for sure that the guy was not supposed to have a gun was there's this Texas church shooting back in late 2017, I think. This is sometime after Parkland and the Las Vegas shooting. And this is committed by some ex-service member who is dishonorably discharged for a criminal offense. And he was not supposed to own a firearm. Not supposed to, under the system. But he was never reported in the system. And then he got a firearm and he was able to kill like over 20 people, I believe, at a church. Horrific crime. But, he was not supposed to own a gun and the system failed him. And it's the same even in the Parkland shooting. Actually, I said that was before the Parkland shooting. The Parkland shooting happened in early 2018. Forgetting my timeline here. But it did happen after the Las Vegas mass shooting. And so the Parkland shooter probably should have never had a firearm, but due to, more lenient school discipline policies that, if he had actually had criminal record from his school days, he would have not been able to own firearms. But, they're wanting to be lenient, so he's able to own them. And so it's like at the same time that they're trying to, decriminalize everything and make sure that minorities, are not barred from anything, even if they have criminal records. It's like, oh, if you have a criminal record and mental illness, you can't own a firearm. But that would, in a sensible society, that would, exclude a lot of criminals, exclude people who have quote unquote gender dysphoria and many other things. But that's not going to happen. The only type of mental illness they'll check for is voting for Trump or something of that sort. So why do all these mass shootings happen? And it's, people have all their own explanations. I do think that one thing that some people get into is that, people want the attention and they feel that this will give them notoriety and fame, more infamy rather than fame. And people do that. And that's why it leads to these stupid, like, we're not going to name the killer. We're not going to name the killer. And they love doing this when the killer is non-white or somebody they don't want to know. It'll be like an Islamic terror attack. And I'm like, we're not giving that killer what he wants. We're not naming him. And so they'll pretend it was like a tropical storm that hit the public setting, and that's what's responsible for it. They're not going to name the killer. You'll always see this when the killer is doesn't pertain or conform to the identity that they want a mass shooter to have, and then the media will be like, we're not going to publicize this. But then when it's a white person, they'll plaster that guy's face and name all over their coverage. There is a point to that, but you're not going to stop that. I mean, people want to know who this is, and it's a big news event. Like, this whole country is obsessed with true crime documentaries and stuff, and you're just going to tell people, like, we're not going to publicize that name. And some outlets will do that, like Daily Wire is like, we will never publicize the name. It's like, wow, that's really making a stand. That's really going to make a difference. No, it's a news item. You have to know who attacked. It's being like covering Pearl Harbor, and it's like, we're not going to give the Japanese what they want. We're just going to say an unknown nation struck us. Like, you have to name what's going on here. Maybe there's a way that you can moderate how much attention that person gets, but I mean, people are going to want that attention. There's some point to that, but I mean, the larger point is that, why do we have so many people who want to be known as mass shooters, who want to be, kill innocent people? And we just live in an insane asylum. Like, we live in a crazy country. And we have all these freaks and weirdos who have not moored in anything. There's no one checking up on them. They don't have a family that cares about them. They don't have a friends that care about them. They don't have any connections to the community. They're just online. That's it. And these people, like, who's going to give a shit if they're going to mass shoot? Nobody's checking up on them. Nobody cares about them. And there's tons of people like that. There's tons of people that are just wandering around, zero connections. I mean, even normal people, like, report that they don't have very many friends. Like, we're a very atomistic society. And we're a society that really allows mental illness to proliferate and to, go off the deep end. Some people want to bring back the asylums. I do. I used to support that position. I still do in a sane society, but I really, once again, if we had mental asylums, they would be throwing in people with right-wing extremist beliefs. They're like, oh, you believe that magic commits more crimes than anyone else? Like, they're responsible for at least 60% of murders? Well, that's insane. You're going to the insane asylum. Like, I don't know if I trust our government to run insane asylums now. I mean, some cases really it's necessary. That's one of those things that you may as well just take the chance on, because there's just so many insane people, whether, homeless, everything else. And a lot of these shooters, but I doubt even a lot of these shooters would even be put in insane asylums. Like, a lot of them are just like weirdos. I mean, they're not like quite like full on schizophrenic, like babbling to themselves on the street corner and like, poop in their pants or something. They're not like that type of level of insane that would get them put in an insane asylum. And they have nobody to institutionalize them. They have a family. Maybe they have a family, but that family doesn't keep tabs on them. They don't have friends that are going to report them. They're totally unmoored. They're totally, atomized. Nobody's going to report them at all. So we live in that type of society, and this society is like, you wandering along among strangers, and one of those strangers could end up killing you. That's just the way in nature of American society. That's just what we live in. We live in an insane asylum where mental illness and crazy people are allowed to proliferate. And unless there is a full-on social cultural revolution, that's not going to change. This is just the fact of life in America, that if you walk into a mall or walking on the street or something else, you could be killed by some maniac. And if they didn't have guns, they could use cars, or they could use any type of weapon, or maybe they could build bombs. Like, it's like these people, if they have a desire to kill, they're going to kill. And there's going to be many other ways to do this. Like, they could say, well, with a mass stabbing, that would mean fewer people die or something. Maybe that's the case. But they could just use a car. Drive into the mall. That's not a laughing matter, but it's, if they have that desire, if they're just those types of freaks, taking away assault rifles or whatever you want to call them, or whatever the left calls them, it's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to turn them into perfectly normal, productive citizens that have no desire to kill people. They will find some other method. And this is, it's just like fact of America. And it's like sad. It's unfortunate, because we're going to see more of these tragedies going forward. And they're going to blame guns. They're going to blame whatever, thing that they want to blame. But it doesn't matter. It's just the fact of modern America. It's just an expression of our society and our civilization at this point to have these mass casualty events. And, there's things that you can do, concealed carry. You can have that. If maybe there's this way that, that could protect you in that situation. Maybe you see a gunman and it gives you a fighting chance. There's, there's no way to avoid it. It's very different from magic crime. Crime with that, it's just like, don't go down that neighborhood. Don't go there. These happen everywhere. Most mass shootings are magic crime. When they look up the mass shootings, they're like, we have so many mass shootings. It's like most of them are drive-bys and these party shootings that happen like that. Birthday party shooting in Alabama, where everyone with colorful names, were among the slain. That's most of the mass shootings. It's like, guys at a party, like, you stepped on my shoe. And then they, start gunning at each other or it's a drive-by. That's most mass shootings. And so at least 75% of the perpetrators are black of mass shootings, even though I always want to make it it's the Chud Jack who's doing the mass shootings. It's not. But those types of events are easily avoided. Just don't go to Aquarius's birthday party or go to that neighborhood. You can avoid it. But with the type of freak show mass shooting that we saw in Allen, Texas, is like, that's not a bad area. I mean, it could happen anywhere. I mean, Parkland was considered a nice school. Those coming at school shooting. It's like, those are not the places you expect, but they can just happen anywhere. And I mean, that's a really unfortunate thing, is that there's nothing you can stop. And that Tennessee congressman who said that, I actually wrote an article agreeing with him, Tim Burchett, who said that, we're not going to stop this. This is a matter of something in people's hearts, not the thing that they own. And only if you change people's hearts is this going to stop. And that's really it. And it's just the type of society we live in. A lot of our pathologies are coming out in these people, and these are the monsters we create, and we just want to say, oh, we'll take the guns. First off, even if people wanted to do that, it wouldn't happen, first off. Second off, that wouldn't solve the problem at all. So that's so we're going to see unfortunately, a lot more highly respected seeing these mass casualty events. We can only hope that we see fewer of them, but unfortunately, sometimes I'm shocked there's not more. I think that's just one of the real tragic things about America, but that's just the country we live in. So you want to look out at what all the major developments in American society over time and looking at it. And they always bring up the example of, in the 19th century, these maniacs would just try to derail trains to do mass casualty events. That's case. Maybe it's something that's always been a part of America, because we've always been much more atomized and individualistic, and people doing their own thing more so than Europe. But it's obviously increasing. The school shootings that were happening in the late 90s, now we just have them all the time. So it's a much bigger thing. I mean, it wasn't that big of a thing in the 2000s as much, but it came back in the 2010s, and it's certainly going to be a bigger part of our life in the 2020s. Now on a related topic about America's culture and society at this moment, and that is going to be talking about the culture war. I had some controversial tweets last week about this subject and what people thought about it, because it's based on this Carrie Lake tweet, which I didn't really get the point about, let's focus on economics and stuff, and let's and it's not so much surrendering the culture war, it's talking about how there are other more important topics to talk about. And then all the DeSantoids were like, no, this is the most important topic in the world today. We must continue to talk about Bud Light, which it has to be, we have to take a step back and discuss what we mean by the culture war. Now, culture war could mean, or cultural issues could mean anything that doesn't deal with the economy directly or foreign policy. So immigration could be a culture war issue. Affirmative action could be a culture war issue. Anti-white racism could obviously be a culture war issue. A lot of things could be culture war issues. So that one definition, we would obviously be about that. I don't think our main thrust is not economics. But that's not how culture war is operating among conservatives. Their culture war is more entertainment war, because it's over these frivolous issues that don't matter. And the number one topic to conservatives right now is Bud Light. Yes, the Bud Light boycott is working. Does this mean that all companies are now going to stop celebrating Pride Month? No. Does this mean they're going to stop featuring gay couples in every fucking ad? No. Does it mean they may stop working with Dylan Mulvaney? Maybe. That's it. And they're just saying we are really punishing this one company for working with Dylan Mulvaney. But every other company is staying woke. Every other company is still, going full speed ahead with DEI. All this stuff. And they're just kind of thinking that this is a victory. And the Bud Light focus is there because they're well, it's a win. But what are you winning? What is the victory that is being upheld here? Are we radically changing society? Are we radically changing the culture by this? Not quite. It's more about who is participating in beer advertisements. It's not even like beer advertisements. It's just like a minor marketing partnership they did. I mean, it was very stupid, and I don't like Bud Light. I think people should boycott it for taste alone. I'm not a fan of it. I always get mad if I'm like hanging out with people and like, I got Bud Light. I'm like, man, this sucks. Like, where's the Natty? I'd rather drink Natty Light. But they're, so that it's like, it's fine that they're boycotting, but it's like becoming to the point where it's like, we can boycott that, but understand what are the important issues. But instead, this is the most important issue, and it makes us feel like we're winning when there's been a lot of things that are showing we're not quite winning and that are more important. Tucker Carlson getting fired is far more important than Bud Light firing their woke VP of marketing. What has more effect on the culture are advancing right-wing issues. Tucker staying on at Fox News, or them Bud Light hiring a slightly less woke VP marketing who is going to just stick to the pride cans and, gay couples rather than having Dylan Mulvaney advertise the beer. What's more important? Obviously, Tucker is more important. And what did conservatives do there? A lot of people were upset, and their Fox News ratings have taken a tumble, but everyone knows that Fox News is going to return, and everyone's going to stick with Fox News, and very few people are wanting. There are some personalities, but most of the people who are really pushing the Bud Light stuff aren't pushing a Fox News boycott or, really wanting to punish Fox News. And if they can just get away with firing their most popular host, and they're still going to retain most of their audience, so they'll probably even retain the vast majority of it. And even some of the people who've left may return. What does that say about conservative cultural power or their ability to impact market decisions? So that's one thing to keep in mind, but that's still slightly entertainment issues because, Tucker Carlson doesn't directly impact people, but he does illustrate and highlight issues that directly impact people. And it's very important for the right to keep him in the public sphere and spreading his views and speaking his mind. So it's more important for that than Bud Light. And the real important issue is Title 42 ending at the border, which Title 42 allows the government to expedite deportations. It was implemented under COVID, and they said, it's to protect public health. But they've been doing it. They've been continuing to do it because of the border crisis. Now it's going to end, and there's going to be a massive, massive rush to the border, which we've been seeing most months except for January and February earlier this year, which the Biden administration was taking a victory lap like, woo, we're only having 130,000 this month, which still far higher than under Trump, but it's lower under the Biden administration, which has been having, it had 10 straight months of 200,000 border detections or people detained at the border. And those only count the ones that they caught. There's been, I think, over 1 million that got away during Biden's tenure. At least 1 million that's got away that they didn't even detect or detain at the border. And so they're celebrating this, and they're attributing it to Biden's parole program, which is what Karine Jean-Pierre was talking about last week, where she's like, illegal immigration is down by 90%, which it's not, but they're trying to claim that because of the parole program, which the parole program, instead of, these illegal immigrants coming here, we tell them like, hey, don't come here illegally. We'll offer you a legal pathway here, and we offer a legal pathway to 30,000 migrants per month from 4 different countries: Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, I have trouble pronouncing it, and Haiti. So those 4 countries. So if you're from those 4 countries, we now offer to those would-be illegals a legal avenue to come here. And they've been saying this is such a success. And they've also been hiding some of the numbers by how they're diverting people to to ports of entry, and that's counted differently. So they've been trying to fudge the numbers as well. But now with Title 42, March, the numbers went back up. April numbers haven't been released yet, but they're likely to show a massive increase. We're probably... my guess would maybe be slightly under 200,000, which is going to show that their parole program that they've been touting so heavily was completely worthless. And it may, it may actually be over 200,000 because in the last weeks of April in preparation for Title 42's, and there's been a huge onrush at the border. In 10 days, there was over 70,000 that were caught. I think this is the last 10 days of April that were caught, and there was, nearly 20,000 that got away. And so those numbers are there. And so maybe if you had 3 or 4 weeks of 70,000 or so, that's going to be well over 200,000. So we'll see. In May, the numbers are continuing to climb. In May, there's definitely going to be well over 200,000. They might break the 250,000 plus record from December. It's going to be total chaos. This is huge news. This is like very, very important that we can have totally open borders and the entire world can come in. And that's not part of the culture war fight. What's part of the culture war fight is beer advertisements, gender neutral Mr. Potato Head, stuff like that, which bothers people, but it's not directly impacts them. Some of the stuff doesn't directly impact their lives. Now, gender theory stuff and gender ideology stuff in schools and critical race theory in schools, that does seem as a direct impact, and that does help Republicans when it comes to elections. A lot of this other stuff that conservatives want to talk about, trans athletes in girl sports, Dylan Mulvaney, drag queen shows, drag shows, even you can even say abortion and throw it in there. That's like the culture war that is there. And a lot of these things, I think most of the audience doesn't like these things. But the average voter doesn't care that much about these things. Or in the case of abortion, they're on the opposite side. Republicans campaign heavily on trans athletes in girl sports. In Michigan, that was one of their main pitches. They put out an ad that was that they were heavily touting. And they lost badly in Michigan. They got mauled. It's not an issue that, polls show that most people agree that, you should be biologically female if you're in girl sports. But it's not an issue they care about because it's like, well, I don't give a shit. And it's like, whatever. It's like, it's an issue that mainly impacts like the top female athletes that they're hoping to get a college scholarship. Some of it is that they don't want to, have showers with like a person with a penis off. That's like probably a realistic concern. But for most of the stuff, it doesn't seem as a major impact. And they've been campaigning heavily on this for a long time. And there's people who are saying Trump lost because he doesn't campaign on this issue. It's like Republicans campaigned on this issue in 2022 and they lost. It wasn't because people were rejecting the Republican position. It was just simply saying Republicans don't understand what actually matters to me. And this is not one of the things that matter to me. And it's kind of the overwhelming emphasis on Bud Light. It's on Dylan Mulvaney. It's like most people are gonna be like, "Why is this such a major concern? Why, the border crisis is a much bigger issue. All these things are much bigger issue. Anti-white racism in the workplace, in schools. Those are much bigger issues. But everyone's like this. And I had a bunch of DeSantoids who are like, actually, this is far more important than the border. Dylan Mulvaney is more important than the border. Or they would say the gender ideology is more important than the border. And if we lose our culture, there's no point to having a border. Which I have to say is what parts of American culture do you want to preserve? Like the pride cans, the gay couples in advertising, tattoos everywhere, everyone smoking weed. What part? Marvel movies? Turn on a fucking TV show. Do you see your conservative culture reflected back? No, you don't fucking see that. What part of the culture are you trying to preserve? Rap music? What part of American culture is that you see that is under threat and we have to risk not losing? That's also a problem with the culture war. Is this issue. It's conservatives. This is not saying it's over or blackpilling. I'm just being honest. The mainstream American culture is lost. It is. This can be reflected by the fact that the NFL does pretty much literally nothing to appeal to conservatives besides some faux patriotism and jets flying overhead at football games. That's why they put out ads saying football is gay and they have BLM propaganda in the end zones. They don't have to risk offending conservatives. They don't care. And it's the same with advertisements. Most advertisements show white men as idiots and who are getting cucked by other groups of people and etc. While they make sure to feature mixed race couples and gay couples all the time, and show their commitment to social justice, etc. They're not showing like their commitment to conservative values here. And it's the same with like TV shows. Like TV shows, all even like the basic network TV shows, all now have like woke lectures and stuff. And it's like, what part? And like country music shows now feature drag queens. Like, awards shows. Not. Of course, there's a lot of conservative country artists who would never have that, but they're the main one of the main country music award shows featured a drag performance, and as a way to protest like these laws being pushed by Tennessee and other southern states. And it's like, okay, like, so yeah, what culture are you preserving here? They don't really have an answer to that. And usually it's like, well, we want to bring back, the 90s. We must preserve the culture represented by Happy Gilmore. Maybe that would be better than what we have today, but that's not like, I don't know if that's like traditional culture. So I ask again, what part of the culture do you think is at risk of being lost? That's one I always, and it makes for good rhetoric of like, if we lose the culture, all is lost. I'm not that black pill but I'm honest. It's saying that culture is already lost. Now we could create a new culture that replaces that, but it has little to do with who is sponsoring or doing marketing partnerships to Dylan Mulvaney. We could get them to, it is somewhat of a victory to make sure that they stop working with Dylan Mulvaney, but that's not going to stop the Pride Cants. That's not going to stop every corporation celebrating Pride Month. That's not going to stop them pushing DEI both in their own businesses and actually into schools, as which Walmart is now doing. They're pushing DEI, critical race theory, into deep red rural counties in Arkansas. So there's a lot of other things, and those things matter more to people than who is being featured in ads. If the culture war means like we're stopping woke crap in education and in businesses, like making sure you no longer have to attend mandatory diversity training, and that impacts people. That has a direct impact on people because everyone has to experience it, and then they'll go there and they're like, hey, they're telling me only white people can be racist. I strongly disagree with that. Why is my company making me learn this? And it's the same at schools. It's like they're teaching my 8-year-old about transgenderism. Like that, I do not want that. When it comes to TV and stuff, like Americans have a live and let live impact or mentality towards these topics. We can complain about it. We can say we wish they didn't have that, but that's the mentality and attitude they have towards a lot of these issues. And when it comes to TV, movies, and ads, they feel like I'll just change the channel or I'll roll my eyes, whatever. But it doesn't really bother me. It doesn't directly impact me. But if it's something that they have to see in the workplace, if it's something that their kids have to experience at their schools, then it becomes direct impact. And it's even the issue of immigration. Is like those topics is like school and workplace indoctrination work well for Republicans. So does immigration. All the polling show that. And, Youngkin won in Virginia, which is a blue state, because of the indoctrination in schools. He didn't talk about that much about trans athletes in girls' sports. That wasn't a major focus. He didn't focus on abortion, probably because, it's a blue state. The vast majority of people support abortion. He didn't talk about Bud Light or, how he is refusing to, the latest fad. He didn't jump on the latest conservative media fad. He focused on indoctrination in schools, and that helped end their new standards that were eliminating merit and placing race over merit. And those things worked. I mean, Americans care far more about, racial preferences in education, where it's going to deny them a spot at the top-notch, high school or a college or a job because they are white. That matters to them far more than who beer companies are deciding to sponsor. But a lot of that stuff is not as entertaining because you have to see it's like conservative media has moved on from critical race theory to obsessing over drag queens 24/7 and Dylan Mulvaney and all this stuff. Probably because it makes for better entertainment for conservative media. Because conservative media is an entertainment complex. Conservative entertainment complex is a real thing. And it's trying to entertain and, outrage its consumers, so more people consume, more people tune in, and it has to create an exciting product. And for whatever reason, the conservative media consumers are more titillated by 24/7 drag queen coverage. I mean, and this is the stuff. Now, like, I think we can all just agree this stuff's disgusting. I don't want to see this. I wish it was less powerful or less prevalent in our society. But you know, if we're running a political movement, we're trying to address like core civilizational issues and issues that will help us win elections. Do drag queens do that? No. I mean, 2022 shows that. I mean, and it may not hurt the GOP, but it doesn't really help, especially obsessing over it. Is Bud Light but boycott going to help GOP win elections or reverse the culture? No. I mean, they're still going to stay the same with all this stuff. If we want to have a culture war, it's got to be on the direct issues or really the direct issue that is the core focus of what the dissident right should be about, and that's the Great Replacement. And the demographics, and people want to say is like, well, if we lose the culture, we won't have a country. The real thing is, if we lose the demographic battles, if we turn into a fully anti-white nation that is allowing the whole world to come here, we will no longer be America. That is far more important than what like colors are on a beer can. Far more important. And we have to stay focused on that. I feel that too many people get distracted by things, or they try to incorporate every issue into this, and then it submerges the core focus. The core focus needs to remain that. It's challenging and reversing the Great Replacement. That is what we're primarily about. That can count as a culture war. That can count. I prefer civilizational war. But I feel that's much more important than the type of entertainment, petty culture war that's popular on conservative media. I think it's... Even the way we portrayed the culture war against Bud Light was accepting, you know, degenerate parts of the culture. You know, the fuck Bud Light rap, you know, and all these guys have like face tattoos and are imitating. Actually, the one guy's is white and he's imitating, you know, he's a wigger. I find that's, you know, more disturbing part of the culture, the state of the culture war than anything else. You know, even in the 90s, like the lamest moderate conservatives and neocons, they didn't consume this culture. Like, you can go back to Commentary, National Review, Weekly Standard, that stuff, and you can find reviews of movies like Pulp Fiction, Seven, Natural Born Killers, definitely. And these guys would say, like, this is absolute trash. I will never allow anyone to watch. Nobody should watch this. We should ban this. They're very anti-rap. They were still anti-rock at the time. You know, the Robert Bork Slouching Towards Gomorrah, which was a really old man reactionary book about how everything he sees is terrible and he doesn't want anyone consuming like modern movies and music. You know, that was the state of conservatism in the culture war. It was actually about not consuming these cultural products. Well, today, conservatives consume all these products. They love rap music. They love prestige TV. But they have problems with, like, I don't like the transgender sex scene. Or it's like, you know, the fact that, like, Dave Rubin and Blair White are a part of the culture war or the Culture Warriors show how stupid this is. Like, Dave Rubin's openly gay, having surrogate children. Blair White, obviously not a real woman. And these are the people on the side of the culture war. So it's like, what culture are you fighting for? You know, and so they're just having like minor complaints, but they're like, I'm still going to consume this culture no matter what. Which, like, even back then, the conservatives were like, I'm not going to consume this. But now, many of those same conservatives who were complaining about, you know, violent movies in the 90s are now watching far more violent, far more graphic prestige TV shows and tweeting all about it. You know, live tweeting about their favorite shows. But the good news is, I want to say, is like people always say politics is downstream from culture. It has some truth to it, but politics is almost its own separate thing. Because if politics is downstream from culture, then there would be absolutely no hope. But you know what? There is hope, because there's a lot of people who are woke right-wing wise, keyed, who consume a lot of terrible cultural products. We can see that from the many people who get mad about boycotting the NFL or boycotting rap or, unfortunately, boycotting weed. And these people are still going to be right-wing. I think it's that now, I'm not the biggest fan of this, but I do think that you see a lot of people who consume the culture around them, but are still more willing to embrace right-wing positions on immigration, on affirmative action, on anti-white racism, and a lot of the other issues that we care about. But there's not, the type of culture warriors that we would have seen in the 90s. People view a lot of these entertainment or culture as just entertainment. It's just something to pass the time. They're like, I'm watching the shitty Marvel movie, whatever. I find it like trash. I think it's stupid that the people consume this. Sometimes it can have a major effect if it's reflecting society's values or reflecting harmful values, but it's more that culture is downstream of society. And the society we're in, it takes a much longer time to change and transform it. And politics are a reflection of society rather more than the cultural products. I mean, some of this way you can say what you define culture and society as, but I think the way conservatives mean culture is like what you're seeing in marketing, what you're seeing on TV, what you're seeing on movies, what you're seeing in music. And, if we're taking that as like our culture, that's not a very high standard. I would be like, it's over, but it's not over because a lot of people just don't take this stuff very seriously. It goes in one ear and out the other. It's just like, oh, it's just a nice catchy beat. That's the type of music I listen to, whatever. I wish I didn't have this opinion because I've always stressed people should aspire to much better culture that reaffirms their values and has healthy values. But over time, I've realized that people don't want to do that, and people don't want to sit and listen to Wagner. They want to listen to Doja Cat or what have you. So some of the discourse around culture war is a matter of what is a part of the culture war. If we mean culture war as fighting back against the Great Replacement and having that as our focus, then yeah, we are pro-culture war. But that's not the culture war that conservatives are fighting. It's Dave Rubin saying, I'm no longer drinking Bud Light to protest wokeness. That is their culture war, and it's just an entertainment topic to get more viewers and to focus on the low-end, petty issues that distracts their audience from the real important issues. Because, unfortunately, a lot of our audience doesn't want to focus on important issues. Not the distant right, but just a broader conservative audience. That's why they got all worked up about like Dr. Seuss or Mr. Potato Head or what have you, these really frivolous issues. They're more willing to go and talk about that, or it's less disconcerting and less uncomfortable to focus on those issues than it is to focus on the deeper, more important issues. So that's my opinion about it. I just don't think that's also when it comes to elections. I think if conservatives, DeSantis really wants to lean in on these issues and attack Trump from the right on them, but I don't even think the Republican audience base is really going to be that convinced, and even a general election audience is not going to vote for this shit. We have plenty of examples from 2022. Trump ran on our issues, the identity issues in 2016 and won. Republicans ran on the entertainment culture issues in 2022 and lost. That's all you need to know about what's more viable to the American public and what wins elections and what they find more important. Now on to the Jordan Neely case, which is shaping up to be a national controversy. Jordan Neely, of course, is the black vagrant who is put in a chokehold by a white Marine who's now been outed as, or his name has now been outed as Daniel Penny, and he died in the scuffle. He died as a result of the scuffle. Now it's led to a huge debate over crime, homelessness, and how to respond to aggressive vagrants on the train. Because we've seen countless videos of these vagrants assaulting, harassing, and intimidating people, cussing them out on trains. And everyone who has seen this video has said, why don't people stand up and do something? Well, this Marine did so, and he's now been turned into a villain and a monster for doing something about it. Even though most of the people on the train seem to be on that guy's side when he was doing it. But he still hasn't been charged yet, which is almost miraculous that he hasn't. I don't know if police released him and felt that he shouldn't be charged, but the district attorney may have other thoughts. So it remains to be seen what will happen. A lot of what I'm going to say right now is things I said in the article I wrote last week, but it's just worth re-emphasizing. It's like this case is reason why no one confronts people in public, especially if they're black. I would say if they're black, white, they may be able to do so, or Hispanic, or something else. is that they know that they'll be turned into a monster or villain if they actually do something. And everyone's like, always like, where's the real men? Where are the real men? Here's the real man. He does something, and all the women are now wanting to throw him in jail. So this is why people just look the other way and focus on, something else on the train when one of these vagrants is around and threatening people. They don't want to be that guy. They could also be killed by, or seriously physically harmed by one of the homeless people too, especially if they're hopped up on drugs and jumping around and displaying a lot of, extreme energy, so to speak. And Jordan Neely also shows like what happens with our society when we no longer care about locking up dangerous and deranged people. It's like we let him wander the streets and continue to attack and harass people. He already had assault charges against him. He had a long criminal record, even though he's been turned into a harmless Michael Jackson impersonator. That's not quite the case with him. He is a menace to society, but society just says, well, go out and do something. So this is once again, we have just so many crazy people and deranged people walking around. I guess Neely, we can hope that he doesn't commit a mass shooting, but he can't hurt and harm somebody, maybe even kill somebody on a train just because, he's deranged and society just looks the other way. And if he gets arrested, he's immediately released, no punishment due, and he goes back to ruining the lives of everyone else and lowering the quality of life. Other deranged people just fantasize about mass murder and getting the high score. And so it's just there is a real decline in basic standards and norms in American society, which is seen in this case of Jordan Neely and the Marine who confronted him. It's the Marine was upholding basic standards and norms and doing the right thing, and he may end up going to jail simply for doing that. I think, it's obvious Daniel Penny is the hero in the story and not Jordan Neely. He did the right thing. This guy was really threatening people, possibly assaulting people. And, he, made sure he wasn't going to harm anyone. Maybe he used a little excessive force. I don't know if it appeared that nobody on the train thought, some of the eyewitnesses were saying we didn't see there was a problem that was happening. So this is what you would want society to do, because if you knew that these people knew that somebody would confront them and put them, make sure that they weren't going to harm anybody, they would probably stop doing that. But these people know they can do whatever they want. They're like our modern aristocrats. They can go and beat and punch and harass people and cuss people out without any punishment. In the same way that aristocrats of old times could, they could ride around and whip the peasants and tell them to doff their caps. And in the same way, you now have to doff your cap for the black vagrant and allow them to do whatever they want, because the system overwhelmingly favors them in a criminal court. So that's just one of the things. I keep an eye on it. I don't have any more original things to contribute besides the article I wrote last week. But we'll definitely keep an eye on this. There'll probably be more developments in this. I hope he doesn't get charged, but I think he will be. I think because it's Alvin Bragg pursuing it, but I think he can be exonerated, because I know there's a lot of people in New York outside of these left-wing freaks who feel he was doing the right thing. Some of the top-rated comments in the New York Times comment section was on the Marine side. So Hopefully there's a happy ending, but it's also he has to go through this whole difficult process to ensure, he's proven not guilty. Now on to the Condom Elite questions, and we've got a lot today. So as a reminder, you too can get the power to ask me questions or suggest guests and topics if you sign up for the Condom Elite option at Highly Respected Substack, and that's at highly-respected.substack.com, and make sure to sign up for the IQ supplements while you're there. Or if you, for some reason, don't want the IQ supplements, get a free subscription so you can get all my great articles and content delivered straight to your inbox. So the first question comes from Dave, and he asks, Scott, what do you think about Elon Musk dropping red pills on Magic over the weekend? And I think it's a big development. Elon Musk, sometimes I find a little cringe, some of the type of fan service that conservatives offer to Elon Musk. I like some of the things he's done with Twitter. Some of the things is not so good. He hasn't brought back everyone. And some of the performance of the site, the site crashes more often or has more weird bugs now. But otherwise, I do like his tweets for the most part. And he is engaging with interesting topics. And he was engaging with a lot of stuff that was revealing about black crime, saying, Richard Hanani had tweet about black crime. There was one showing like interracial violence, how it's overwhelmingly committed by blacks onto other groups, particularly black on white. And he was like sharing this stuff. And, he did have a cringe tweet, I think it was today or yesterday, about how he supports more legal immigration. And it's like, yeah, that's terrible. He's not going to deliver everything we want. And also, he's a tech mogul. Of course, he's going to like more legal immigration. That's a problem. He's not perfect. I do think there needs to be some skepticism about Elon Musk, but him interacting and sharing the stuff about black crime, truth about black crime that most people don't know about, and even him, acknowledging that, at least 60% of murders are committed by blacks. Actually, the true figure is likely far more, because the majority, half of murders, at least half of murders in America are not solved. And pretty much the vast majority of those murders that are not solved are in black communities. So the real figure is probably at least 2/3, 70%, maybe even 75% of murders are actually committed by blacks. Whites probably commit fewer than 10% of murders in America. But anyway, most Americans don't realize that. They think that whites commit 60 or 70% of murders, that blacks are unfairly targeted in all these crimes. And the real facts are they commit at least 60% of the murders, likely more. Also, another thing is that that's FBI data, which a lot of police departments don't submit their data, so it's likely more. But 60%, most people aren't aware of that. Most people aren't aware that the fact that the vast majority of interracial violence is committed by blacks against whites and other groups. They don't realize these facts, and these are important for them to get out in the public. So even though Elon Musk has a lot of cringe opinions about topics about immigration and everything, this is an important service he's doing to highlight these facts. Now, should you go total fangirl and stuff? Like, maybe not. But you should appreciate it, and you should share that stuff. And I think it's very important that you get that stuff out there, because most people aren't aware of this stuff. They listen to the mainstream media, and they watch TV shows, where this is actually talking about culture, but they watch like Law and Order shows, and every murderer is a white guy. And so they have the impression it's like, I guess whites are committing most of the murders in New York City. It's a very different story. It's like over 90% are I remember one figure is like over 90% are committed of murders in New York City are committed by non-whites. So very different story in reality. But most Americans don't realize this, and if it takes the world's wealthiest person to illustrate these facts, then we should be, this is a white pill. This is like good that we're getting the information out there, because one of our most important tasks, and some people are like, what should we do? What should we do? It's like, really is propaganda, and getting the truth out there is our most important task, because the people right now are not sold on our side. They don't get a lot of these issues. They don't understand them. They're cucked by the mainstream media. You could say that. Getting that information out there and telling them like this is the reality, this is the truth, and telling them this is what they need to know, then they'll finally get the truth, and maybe they'll change their behavior and change their politics and move in the right direction. And it's up to us to get that message out there, because people talk about secession and all this stuff. It's like, you need to wake people up before you have any type of radical discussion, and the vast majority of Americans are not woken up yet. It's time to wake them up from their slumber with hate facts and red pills, and Elon Musk is doing that. Obviously, the illegal immigration thing is not something that I'm a fan of, or any of us would be a fan of. But, sometimes the messengers are not going to be perfect. We can criticize him for the legal immigration thing. This is not to say like, don't criticize him for that tweet saying more illegal immigration. No, obviously criticize him. Criticize him when he's wrong. And maybe he probably won't, because it's his economic interest to support more illegal immigration. But it's also the funny thing about it's probably part of his economic interest to understand like crime. It's like, why is the city so bad? Like, why, do I have to add all these additional security features to my cars and other things? Or, I have to worry about the safety of my workers because of like this. And it's like actually magic. And he's probably more willing to see that this is a direct threat to his economic interests, not just a direct threat to his safety. So I think it's very good. There is one final point I want to say this, is that I do notice that there's the potential for this new type of alignment, which this is being led by Vivek Ramaswamy, which becomes, you could say that this is anti-magic, but pro-immigrant. And that's the Vivek Ramaswamy campaign. Vivek Ramaswamy is awesome when it comes to affirmative action, on crime, on anti-white racism, on critical race theory. A lot of the stuff, like he's, anti-white indoctrination, critical race theory, indoctrination in businesses. He's very good on these subjects. But like Elon Musk, he wants more legal immigration because he wants more people who look like him to come to America and dominate America. And, I don't fully say this is. I'm trying to get my words clear here because I do want to say I do oppose their support for legal immigration. But at the same time, it is an interesting angle. I don't know how much more it will develop. I don't want to say, everyone wants to say, like, this is a huge threat that this could happen. I would say that it's like an interesting development if it happens. And if it did become popular, I do think that you would be able to easily transfer that energy into also opposing legal immigration. I think it's part of the pie. If you're realizing that demographics and a certain demographics committing more crime and causing all this damage, you're probably also not going to be a big of a fan of what's driving demographic change in America, which is legal immigration. So some people may say, like, well, I support more legal immigration because it's a part of my economic interests, etc., to do this. But I don't really like this anti-white racism. I don't like crime. I don't like affirmative action. But you'd have to say, it's like, look, with immigration, these people are going to come here and they're going to want all those goodies and they're going to support anti-white racism because it's part of them gaining more power and influence over our society. And you have to, you just can't separate the two from each other. You can't just say, like, I'm anti the magical destruction, I'm anti this type of issues, but I'm pro-immigrant. Eventually, there's too much cognitive dissonance there, and they're going to have to accept the whole pie. And so I think if that actually became popular, I think it would view it as a positive development, but you'd have to, be really strong on ensuring that you direct that into also being woke on the issue of immigration. So now on to the other questions, and we have 4 more. This is great. Now, if I somehow missed your... I'm worried I may have missed it because I was like traveling around a bit and, I had a massive amount of stuff in the inbox. So if I missed it, just make sure to, ding me again, and massive apologies for missing it. But we do have a lot of questions. I think that this is everything because this may be a record for the amount of questions we have. And so going through the questions, this one comes from Tom. We'll call him Tom here. And he asks, you had a great episode about the role of alternative culture and the success of German social democrats after the collapse of Imperial Germany. You also once read an essay by Evelo where one of the main points was how materialistic American culture is. In one way or another, you have brought up the problems of how central materialism is to American life. In the foreseeable future, do you believe that rather than an alternative culture, the American equivalent will be about economic activity, offering networking options and opportunities for career advancement, like country clubs and chambers of commerce led by highly respected gentlemen? Actually, yes. I actually do think that that's true. There's some people who are trying to do this. Some of the methods aren't as quite the way, because we are not like a type of cultural country as like I went about like some of the cultural activities that if you guys listen to this podcast I did about the Social Democrats in Imperial Germany, they're gathered around and singing songs and this stuff and putting on plays and things. First off, like in the modern world, that's not how we quite consume culture. Second off, like Americans like no longer like group singing. I think it's like powerful. I think some attempts to have done this that the alt-right did, it came off as weird and too try-hard. I like that. I wish we could have that, but that's not really it. I do think it is having these networks where people, who are saying like, I'm not going to take diversity training. I'm not going to do this. And there's a network in place for those people to advance their career in that. An example of this, even though it's, it is pretty cringe, is the Federalist Society. Law schools are overwhelmingly liberal, but the Federalist Society offers an alternative. And being a member of the Federalist Society, because, there's roughly equal number of federal judges and other things, that being a member of Federalist Society is probably going to help you advance your career more than just being a part of the standard law school masses, because those guys are desperate for conservative clerks. They don't want to have liberal clerks. And knowing that guy was like heavily involved in Federalist Society, they can get them a clerkship, or they know some legal friends in the legal world who will just like want to hire conservative legal lawyers and all that. So that's like an example of something that works in that type of networking opportunity for career advancement. So I think actually, yeah, I think it will be more centered around economic activity and offering people opportunities to be free of wokeness and anti-white racism and how they advance. And that will probably be more of the way it takes. And I think it's like important that it has to be centered around getting these people involved in it through college campuses. And that thing is like when they're young and they may decide to be woke or liberal because they think that'll advance their career, and it has to offer them is like, no, you do not have to sell out. There is another opportunity for this, and it's part of that network. So I think it'll be more about creating the culture, because people don't want the avant-garde culture, and it's like, and people don't have the money to make like a based Marvel movie and these things, and it's probably more about finding like-minded people who can all help each other, and also allow people to know that there are sane people in the real world who think like you, who believe in the same things and want the same world as you. And just having that alone, I think, is an important part to the type of culture we can have. It's really more about like finding friendship and economic activity than like what we view as culture. And so he said, his second question, also a very good question. He said, on a related note, where do you believe the bulk of the American counter leak is most likely to come from? You've mentioned that in Russia it was from the KGB. If Trump and Musk are any indication, it may be in the business world. Most likely, I don't think it's quite well formed yet in the counter elite, because most like when I talk about the counter elite, the idea I put in there is that so people don't drop out and decide like, this society is so over, I don't want to have any role in this, I'm going to move out to the rural area and be a plumber. That's just like the serf option. You can have a nice life, but you're not going to challenge any power. You're just going to be a serf in that. And maybe that's what you want, but you're going to have no power or influence over how American society is. And rural America is rapidly depopulating, unfortunately. So what I say about the counter elite is that you really need to strive to do your best in society and achieve great things while not selling out. And we need great doctors, we need great lawyers, we need great people who are in the financial world, even though some people are like, oh no, all finance is bad. Like, you do need people who understand this stuff if you want to run a successful society. And so you do need people like that. And so it could be from the business world that they stand up, but it's more of like what type of demographic it's going to come from. And it'd probably be the traditional, right-wing demographic in America, is like the white middle class. But you need to make them aware that the goody train can't last forever. It's like the gravy train can't last forever, and that they need to wake up to these issues, and they need to strive to contend for power in our society. Otherwise, we're just going to be dominated by foreigners and our elites. I mean, it's like the amount of Asians who are going to dominate higher education and like the elite universities is insane. Like, we could end up in like 10, 20 years with like over half of every elite university is overwhelmingly Asian. And I don't, that's not going to be good for America to have this foreign elite that's getting, educated in anti-white racism and views the whites as like these evil colonists or colonizers, and that they're now the peasants, and they're going to react very negatively to them and support all these crazy anti-white things. So it could be the business world waking up, maybe. Particularly what it can be, you just need, I don't know if it's quite well developed yet. But I mean, you can see like the popularity of Vivek on CNBC and Fox Business, where he goes off on anti-white racism and these diversity initiatives. There is some level of support within the business world for this, but at the same time, the business world wants more immigration. So I don't know. It'll come from somewhere, and it's more, maybe it's like younger people emerging. The idea of counter elite that I have is that you just have smart, competent, well-trained people who are ready to move in these positions of power in case there's a big change at top or there's some disturbance. Because if you look at any society, it's people who were in fairly elite positions before who moved into the prominent elite. It wasn't just like, hey, our society collapsed, we're going to recruit welders from the rural hinterlands to run our society now. That's not what happens. So Those are great questions, very good questions. The first question in particular is very good. I think that's a good way of framing it and viewing how we would build a counterculture rather than like we're being right wing hippies of some sort. All right, and so the next question comes from somebody who goes by Future American Refugee, which I think this Future American Refugee is different from the one on Twitter. I think he would have said that this is the Future American Refugee on Substack. That refugee goes by Future Moldovan Citizen now on Twitter. They run the night. He does Night Owls with highly respected friend Nightmare Vision. So I believe this is someone else, but he's got a good question too. So he's coming out. So different refugee. But his question is, Michelle Obama appears to have serious presidential ambitions. That, coupled with the fact that she consistently polls at the top of most inspirational women in the world, makes me think her presidency is a foregone conclusion. Some Fox News viewers have been speculating she may run in 2024, although I think her husband are politically savvy enough to wait for Trump to be gone, and she will hold off a run for 2028. What are your thoughts on whether or not she will run in the foreseeable future? Also, what are your thoughts on what a Michelle Obama presidency forecast in our future? Is she the anti-white BIPOC coalition-led left-wing dictator that we fear is inevitable? That's a good question. I'm actually, if she did run, she would be very popular, but I don't think she wants to run as a politician. Being a politician means putting up with a ton of bullshit. This is not me trying to compliment Michelle Obama, but Michelle Obama has very thin skin. She does not, she had many go off moments. And if she had political ambitions, she would already be running for office. She's just rather kind of a symbolic first lady that people really like, and maybe she likes having some influence. I don't think she would run in 2028. First off, she would be in her later 60s. I forget, her husband was born in 61 or 62. So she'll probably be 65, 66. She will no longer be young. Now that she was young, maybe before. But, when they're in 40s and 50s, like, oh, she's a young candidate and this stuff. I don't know if she wants to spend her retirement years, like, running for president. They always wanted to get Oprah Winfrey. They always want to get these popular black women because they would be huge hits with the base. But a lot of them do not want to deal with the type of stuff they have to deal with as a politician. She never liked to be in the spotlight. This stuff really got under her skin. And she didn't really know how to control herself. And she had a lot of, adulation and all this stuff. But I don't know, she would not do well. I mean, like, the fact is there would be, like, some prominent commentator who'd call her Michael Obama and, like, this stuff. And she doesn't want to go through, and she, like, obviously doesn't want to be humiliated like that. I mean, nobody does. But she, no, I do think if she actually announced to run in 2028, she probably would be the front runner. I mean, this is 5 years out, so we don't know what quite. But I think she would do well, but I don't think she'll ever run. I don't think so. Her time to have run would have, maybe not 2020, but I don't think she has political ambitions. This could all change. Like I said, it's the same with like Tucker Carlson in 2028. It's like he doesn't have political ambitions at all, but he could change. But this is also somebody his life is centered around politics. I think Michelle Obama likes being like this dignified first lady who's putting out like is raising awareness about children's health and other things. And she knows that if she got on the campaign trail, then another side of her would come out and this would be an angry black woman. And people are not ready to vote for that. I mean, they do not want to vote for that. I think Oprah Winfrey was the same reason she didn't want to run. Also, Oprah Winfrey didn't want to, put her wealth at risk either. So, no, I think I don't think she'll run. But if she did run, let's say theoretically she run. No, she wouldn't be the Chavez candidate. She would be a Bidenist candidate. She would run what's down the middle for Democrats. She would be a continuation of that. She would be trying to appeal to the middle class and all this stuff. It'd be more of a continuation of her husband. She would not be a Chavez candidate. You have to wait for somebody else to like that, like maybe like Jamal Bowman or somebody of that sort, or this new mayor for Chicago. She wouldn't be a part of that if she actually ran. But as I said, Yes, she would be a very popular candidate in the same way with like Oprah Winfrey, which everyone was talking about Oprah Winfrey running maybe in 2016 or in 2020, and she didn't do it. And Michelle Obama is going to be, at least in her mid 60s at that time. I don't think she's going to want to run. And if she wanted to run before, she would have been making, like, I'm going to run for Senate, I'm going to run for Congress or something. But she doesn't want to do that, like the way that Hillary Clinton did. But the old rules that Hillary Clinton was operating under when she ran for Senate, like you have to have elected office, is no longer there. Well, that can change between now and then, but I'm doubtful. But if you are right, I will look like an idiot, and she's like the front runner and becomes president. God help us. Then you could be right. But I'm not. I don't think, as I keep emphasizing, I don't think she'll run. And the final question comes from New England Refugee, our good friend New England Refugee, who has a question about a book he read. He was like, "Hey Scott, got done reading The Fourth Turning. It is a book that says Anglo civilization goes through cycles of about 80 years that changes the entire outlook of civilization, starting with 1776, then the Civil War, then World War II. We're 80 years after World War II right now, so we seem to be in one. Do you believe in cycles of history as described in this book and by people like Spengler, or do you think history is more linear?" There's cycles of sort. I am not one of those people who's like linear theory. Spengler had like a more of a broader cyclical view of history, but even his cyclical view of history was proven wrong. It's more that history is not linear. It just goes all over the place. And for civilizations, there is a cycle that happens with them, but it's not set on any time spans. The 80 years, so much can happen in 80 years that you can just say that like this is the next turning, like 1776, Civil War, World War II. There's so much that happened. So you could point that we're 80 years after, you could say COVID or Trump is the fourth turning. I don't subscribe to it as like that, like time definite of a cycle. And civilizations just have their own unique cycles that they go through. It's not like, oh, well, every empire lasts for 250 years. Or people always like to say that, or 150 years. And we're about to hit the 250 year mark. And so it's about to be over for America. It's like, no, there's not like a set lifespan for this stuff. History and life is far more chaotic. It's hard you can't really draw a line or a cycle. I do believe in cyclical view of history is maybe a better way of viewing it than a progressive line that's like life is just getting better and better all the time. I don't think that's the way to look at history, but it's more that history is all over the place. Civilizations come and go. Civilizations rise and fall. And I don't think... We think that we're in a turning right now because it always feels like in the present we're in a chaotic mood, and because it's the present, it's what we're living through right now. Nobody wants to say like I'm living through a boring age or I'm living through an age of nothingness. And maybe it feels like something's changing now. If the only fourth turning would probably be, rather than like Trump, it would probably be a decline in American imperial power and a rise in Chinese power. That's like, if maybe that could happen later on in this decade. So you could say that like, oh, it's every 80 years. But that's more what I would think that the turning would be if we're going on the 80 years limit. I know Bannon really likes talking about the fourth turning and Trump and that stuff, but I don't fully buy it. I like Spengler. I think a lot of the things he talks about is interesting, and that he does point people another way of viewing history, because the linear view of history is the more prevalent view, but it's the way to view history is to view that humans haven't changed that much in what they aspire to, what they want, what they hate, what they love, how they interact with humans and human societies, to study how we act as a collective whole and what things make up who we are. I think that those are the things to look at, and that's what the importance of studying history. It's not like history, exactly, is a full echo of itself, but you can see, past human behavior reflected in history and then apply that today. And that's what the founding fathers did when they studied Greek and Roman history. And that's what most smart people have done is they look back in time, they viewed how events were shaped by human behavior and what to do about that human behavior and how that illustrates and informs us of the human experience. So those are my views. I wanted to subscribe to the fourth turning but if there is a fourth turning, it's most likely to be the rise of Chinese imperialism or the displacement of American global power, which could happen in 10 years. So maybe it will be a little off from the 80-year mark. But those are my thoughts, and that's it for Highly Respected today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the new day when it came out. So we're going to have a great IQ supplement later this week and some great articles as well. So be on the lookout for that. So until next time, stay respected.